So what I'm trying to say is that a given thing, like a relationship, is very particulate in play. Just like swinging a sword is very particulate in play.
Yeah.
And so, or how good you are with your sword, or whatever. The fact you have the word sword on your sheet. These things are particulate in play, and therefore the way they are handled operationally can only be assessed relative to every other mechanic that they may touch. And let's be sane here and say one step removed beyond directly. Going further than that gets a little crazy. So we say, okay, the mechanic for swinging a sword, what mechanics does that touch upon directly, feeding in or coming out? What things do we know about it because we did it, but are not quantified or operated upon in any separate mechanic? A really good example I was just talking about in the fantasy game Legendary Lives. You roll hit location for the bad guy hitting you first. So no matter what, you know where that strike's coming in, even before you know how well it's happened. Then you roll to find out what happened, and the narration of it all is so tempting and easy to then describe exactly what happens as an outcome of what angle they had to come at you in order to hit that spot. And so you know where they end up and where you end up. You actually do skirmish talk at the table without even knowing you're doing it. You know that you've been spun around and are stumbling backward. You know that he has, if he was down on the ground last time and he went for your throat this time and he missed, it's so easy to have it described that he ends up on the other side of you as you spin around in a defensive posture. Right? So it's, and there's no mechanic for movement, combat movement in Legendary Lives. There's no battle map. There's no hex movement. There's no nothing. But the strange emergent property of doing that hit location first is to generate a great deal of combat choreography along the way that's very convincing, and after a moment or two, an exchange or two, it's very causal. You're ended up because you as the player aren't constrained by the hit location. You can say what you do outright. And people always do it based on the description of what just happened. So do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
About that? If you over-engineered that, you would be taking away something that's a wonderful element of how we create fiction together.
Yeah.
Same thing goes for the relationships. But you have to understand that roll to hit in Legendary Lives has its own intrinsic effect. You don't roll damage separately from the 2-hit roll. You get degrees of success, and that tells you precisely how much is done. You also, this may be less relevant, Legendary Lives is the first game I know of, 1991, I think, the first game I know of where only the players roll. Bad guys have an attack, bad guys have a defense, and they are fixed numbers. So in order to not get hurt by them, you roll your defense with that target number.
Right.
If you want to hurt them, you roll your attack against their defense target number. And that's it. The next game to do that I know of was Whispering Vault in 1994. So my point is, though, with that feature in there as well, you'll notice that, quote, traditional rolling has been cut in half.
Yeah.
So therefore, you've actually opened up a really nice opportunity for the way narration comes out of NPCs' attack motions and the way narration comes out of PCs' attack motions differ and become complementary.
That is a good. It's kind of funny because that strongly ties into your earlier discussion on instrumentation for me, because hit location is one of the mechanics which I have most despised in my career as a gamer. So it's interesting to hear that you could do something that causes so much narrative and so much imagination from something that I found to be tedious in the past.
It usually is tedious because, number one, it's inserted between hitting correctly,
right,
hitting successfully, I mean, and then rolling damage after that.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, that's extraordinarily back and forth and jarring and stuff. You roll to hit, and you're not allowed to know how to imagine that. You have to go through the whole rigmarole of rolling to hit, checking your value, checking strike rank, checking distance, checking all that stuff, going by RuneQuest here, and then rolling hit location if you hit successfully. What the hell does that mean? Don't you know where you're going for before you roll? I mean, wait, what? So you see what
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting because if you were to try to take any sort of authorial stance in the more tedious thing, it would be subverted by the hit location. Whereas if you roll it beforehand, you can then take that as fodder for your authorial.
Precisely.
Okay. Cool.
And that is the interplay of mechanics at this fine-grained level, which should never be disregarded. But you then have to choose what's quantified, and you have to choose what is going to be subject to fortune, or bounce, more accurately. And that means that we go up to the next level. So here we were talking about relationship mechanics and IEE, right? Go ahead.
I just want to say one thing real quick that I wanted to thank you because that helped me understand what you meant by the comment in your previous video. That when I asked what you meant by soft mechanics versus hard, and now that I'm imagining a diagram where every little possible permutation of effort is diagrammed, that sounds like a terrible game.
Well, not only that, I mean, we all know what it looks like. We've all seen serial killer, TV shows and movies, and we've all seen all their walls.
Right.
I mean, so the thing with those, okay, because I wanted to start with those because it seems so intuitive to have representational mechanics and to have probabilities in those representations for bounce. It seems very intuitive. What I'm trying to say is that doesn't mean that we should try to fill in everything with representations and probabilities and quantities and stuff, nor should we say, well, that's just fetishizing, and if we just talk it through, it will be fine.
Yeah.
So and it's not even a matter of saying, well, there's got to be a balance. Well, yeah, there does have to be a balance, but that's not insightful. What we have to say is that there has to be operations that make any one of the micro procedures fuel the others. And the good news is that this can be done at a very coarse grain as well as a very fine one. The resolution system for the pull works fine. And you decide the scope of the part of the conflict that the die roll will pertain to, and you roll, and if you get a 1 on any of the dice, you succeed. And that's it.
Yeah.
Because what matters in the pool is the investment in the number of dice, whether you have chosen to increase the number of dice from your pool or not, and how much you stand to lose if they don't all come up, if none come up ones. And then there's a whole diagram for the pool, which is all about the flow of points, dice, pool dice, and the what they call the monologue of victory, a narration step. So it's really beautiful, but the pool would be harmed by making the resolution inside more fine-grained. People have tried it, and they always bounce back from it and say, that was a bad idea. Given what we know about this larger, coarse-grained effect of this roll, we always have a fine time knowing exactly what happened in that exchange of the conflict. Even if it's the whole conflict, not just an exchange within it. Even if it's the whole one, people have no trouble. They're able to do it they've got enough going on based on what was mechanized that they can do it. So that's the nice thing about any of these. Coarse versus fine grain, wherever you want. It will work at any grain.
Makes sense.